Hello, thanks so much for checking out my first book, I Solved ADHD. This is the introduction and where I want to have us start. What if you weren't broken? What if you weren't a mental health disorder? What if your experience of having ADHD was exactly the way you were designed to be? And the problem wasn't with you, and instead the world you were born into? What if we lived in a world where our brain wasn't divorced from our body and we created language and understanding for the whole person? What if the fringe spaces on the internet helping people heal that got created during 2020 to 2022 will soon turn into the templates for creating a world that works? What if you weren't made to do this alone, nor need to pull up your bootstraps, and the way our country was created makes us the problem for profit and is what led me into a locked box? What if the millions of messages preached on social media and Sundays have no clue what actually works for us or anyone else for that matter? These are some of the questions that I set out to touch on in this book. And something that I live by is one, in other words, lives the questions. And the quality of my life is the quality of my questions. So I desire to start off with these 7 questions that show up for me. I invite you to do the same. As full disclosure, I do not give the answers as to how to solve ADHD in this book. And no, I did not bait and switch you. This is what I can be quoted as declaring inside of a mental health hospital. There's also part of me writing this book to prove to myself that I'm not crazy, so I can create the protection I need to create the safety needed to heal, as it is still legal in Washington state for a crisis responder to misunderstand me and the state to hold me against my will, which for me has the emotional, spiritual, and psychological impact of being taken against my will for 10 days, which has resulted in my successful photography business being heavily impacted and losing my full-time job. So for those of you who purchase this book, it supports me in ways that I fall short to express, and I believe will help all humans, as you will soon see my vision in the pages following. As I believe ADHD is a well-being disorder, and as someone who has been on a mission to have the world work for the ADHD brain, I believe I can make a difference with that. I was diagnosed with ADHD in October 2020. And no longer have the same ADHD symptoms. I believe those who have ADHD have a different brain type, or maybe it's an evolved state of the human brain, or maybe it is how Dr. Ed Hallowell defines as a trait. If those with ADHD have an interest-based nervous system and can only do what they're authentically interested in, I don't see a problem with that. I see that as a beautiful way to live a life if radically aligned to what works for you. Heaven on earth vibes show up for me. And instead we blame the human and not the environment they are in. If a tree doesn't grow, we don't blame the tree. And there are many who have found their way of thriving with ADHD. And I believe it comes down to 2 things: alignment and environment, which can be said another way as unconditional love and support. I believe living in an environment that is out of alignment with our true selves is where the real problem for those with ADHD lies. All I know is that I experienced a wild turn of events that led me to publicly declaring with all passion and resolve, I solved ADHD, to those inside of a mental health facility, and then later on to those working behind the counter at the emergency department. I also asked 2 neurodivergent humans to please record this inside of the mental health hospital before I was told, Steve's friend has a room for you, and then escorted into an ambulance arranged by the Lacey fire chief. I also told the crisis responder she was not listening to me. Maybe I was crazy. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe I wasn't having both a medical and mental reaction at the same time from a medical procedure I had done prior. What I have now found is best described as a spiritual emergency. Maybe I was experiencing myself as unmasked autistic for the first time. Or maybe none of it's true and nothing is wrong with me and I'm a neurotypical masking as a neurodivergent human. Or another way my brain likes to create it after being taken into a psych ward is that I am a psychopath who desires heaven on earth. You will have to read my full story in the bonus section to determine for yourself how you desire to define me. I believe I am undefinable. I also believe I'm a run-on sentence and that the word "and" will save our planet. I also believe I'm undiagnosed autistic, and with the trauma of reintegrating back into a world that doesn't work for me has created a more accurate definition of myself as ADHD. I know I love the number 3, was a double major in finance and management that I completed in 4 years, have hyperfixated on practically everything you can think of, with a special interest in nutrition, well-being, ADHD, language, and the nervous system. I also know that the other crisis responder told me he would follow me on TikTok. I was also a part of a fundamental religious cult or high control group for those who don't yet believe how the beliefs in a megachurch that imploded in a day could best be defined as a cult, which makes up a huge part of both my trauma and real lived experience. I am clear on how words and the nervous system work together, so I continue to edit myself to make friends with those who are both privileged and in power inside of a system that doesn't work for us, so I can continue in creating a world that works for everybody. Maybe you too can see that my soul, God, universe, or whatever you ascribe everything to has volunteered me as tribute. Or maybe we can simply see my experience is what happens inside of a system that doesn't comprehend how to work with a whole human. And I desire to complete my first book so I can see myself as the author I am, which is part of a strategy concept inside of my methodology and a life hack I have discovered in creating a year of content. There is a magical thing I discovered. When I show up for none and create for myself, those who are radically aligned to me will get an experience unlike any other. I don't understand it, and so I continue to operate this way until another one makes more sense. Melanie Ann Layer, who since 2017 has brought in over 60 million in her business, calls it for me, for you, for us, which I see as doing what makes sense and building an environment around exactly that. And I believe this is how I solved ADHD for me. I also see it defined as integrity. And this is the magic of it all. Another way of saying life hack for those who do not get down with the woo. And my stomach just made a very loud noise when I wrote that. Have I shared I pattern recognized my own nervous system through this traumatic experience and that it all comes down to language and listening? Another way I desire to help neurodivergent humans so they can go from hopeless to empowered, from surviving to thriving, and from the struggle bus to You Make Sense Academy. Because no, while I do not have the answers for how to solve ADHD, I simply believe that I have. And a root core belief I operate from is this: you cannot live beyond what you believe. So here I am to introduce you to my methodology and what works for me so that you can see what I mean and hope it makes sense for you too. I have found it has come by way of giving up the need to fix myself and find the answers and instead shifting into self-discovery. Essentially, rabbit hole engage on self, which is not something culturally supported. I also invite you to become a real life whole life friend and join me on our app, a space I created to bring all neurodivergent brilliance together, as I desire us to show up in discovery, curiosity, and creativity, so together we can A, learn to take care of ourselves, and 2, take over the world. As I believe our interest-based nervous system we were made with are going to lead the way in revolutionizing this planet, because I believe when the world works for us, it works for everyone. And we were made for this, and I solved ADHD. That is what I believe. Now the rest is up to you with everything. Jenna. If you would like to continue on in reading my book, you can purchase it down here in the comments below. If you are on the app reading this book, you can click down below for the next section of this book. I appreciate you being here. I'm excited for what's next, and we're just getting started.